Can you start by telling me what is bankruptcy?
What bankruptcy means is that for a period of 12 months you can't be a director or involved in financial management of a company, and you cannot incur credit over that period of time without telling the person that you're bankrupt, and that credit's limited to £500. The more notable ones is you can't be a member of parliament, a councillor, but the sort of things I see more often is you can't be a practising accountant, solicitor or barrister, can't be involved in financial services, a problem crops up time and again, you can't be a publican. It is important actually to look at your contract of employment, because increasingly there is a clause in there that says that the employer can or has the option to make you redundant should you be made a bankrupt.
So it still has very serious implications.
It can do for a lot of people, and one has to exercise caution before you go into bankruptcy, because it isn't as easy as the media would have you believe.
And what assets would I stand to lose?
There are various categories of assets. There are those assets that you're allowed to keep, the household contents, unless you've got any antiques of course, a modest vehicle, £2,500 vehicle you're allowed to keep. You cannot have your pension fund taken away from you or your tools of trade. But what is taken into account is the domestic property, any investments that you have like endowment policies. They can get what's called an income payments order against you for 3 years. So if during the first year that you're bankrupt they perceive that you have surplus income, i.e. more than enough to live on, they can get what's called an income payments order against you for 3 years and ask you to pay that amount monthly for a 3-year period. Also, should you have a windfall, somebody dies leaving you money, or you win the lottery, they'll take that sufficient to pay creditors in full, plus cost, plus interest.
I could lose my home.
Well, the house is the one that is particularly at risk, because that typically is where all the value is. And there'll be different scenarios. There'll be those people with the scenario where there is no equity, because they've not only got a first charge but perhaps a second charge from a secondary lender against it, and so they're in what we call a negative equity situation, in which case the trustee in bankruptcy will not seek to have the house sold. It doesn't mean to say that the mortgage company or second charge holder may force the sale of the property. Then there's the situation where there is some equity in a property and you're the sole owner, in which case the trustee in bankruptcy can immediately take possession proceedings and indeed eviction proceedings. Where it is a jointly owned property, husband and wife owning it, and there's equity in the property, under the Matrimonial Homes Act, the trustee in bankruptcy cannot force the sale of the property for 12 months. After 12 months, the rights of creditors become paramount. Therefore, he is at that stage allowed to go for possession and eviction. Although normally what a trustee will do is turn around to the spouse and say, can you afford to buy his half share of the equity off me as trustee in bankruptcy, say, for the benefit of creditors. So that option is given to the spouse first. But as I say, if she's unable or unwilling to buy it, then the trustee can force the sale of the property regardless of whether there are children living in the property or elderly relatives. The rights of creditors are paramount in that situation.
How long does this period of being a bankrupt last?
Well, the bankruptcy period is just for 12 months, but if you've incurred your debts irresponsibly or irrationally, let's say through gambling, or you've just incurred the debts in a period immediately prior to bankruptcy where there's no realistic prospect that you can repay your debts, then the Insolvency Service, the Department of Trade, can obtain what's called a bankruptcy restriction order against you. So the restrictions that I referred to earlier can be extended for between 2 and 15 years. And currently we're seeing about 1,000 people per year with one of these restrictions placed against them.
And finally, do other people need to know that I'm a bankrupt?
Well, absolutely. The first thing that happens in every bankruptcy is it's advertised in a publication called the London Gazette and the local papers. It specifies your name, your occupation and the address at which you live in, so that the world at large knows that you're bankrupt.